Hey folks,
This meeting is being recorded.
let's try that again. Hey folks, so as you're thinking about your summer, so it's beginning of June 2023 right now, and of course we have a election next year, um, and I invite you to spend this summer actually getting reacquainted with what this nation is all about. So as you're planning your trips, thinking about what you're going to read, yeah, a lot of great fiction, but consider that we all need to be re-onboarded as Americans. Um, we have gone through 4 or 5 years, well, depends how you count, could be up to 7, 8, of just complete fragmentation, despair, resignation. We've kind of lost the narrative. And so my invitation is to get reacquainted with what it is that we're actually doing here. Because if you're like me, I've long forgotten about civics in junior high or U.S. history in high school or U.S. history courses I took in college. I mean, it's gone. Like it's just, I was paying attention to other things. So I invite you to actually step into an active citizenship. And that first begins by getting what this nation is really all about. So the first place I invite you to start is actually a book that's not about the United States specifically, but lays the intellectual foundation for the entire human journey. And that is Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow. Graeber is an anthropologist, Wengrow is an archaeologist, and basically this book has kind of turned on its head the myth of progress, or the arc of human progress. It's turned on its head the inevitability of our current system. So a lot of folks, think that this kind of global industrialized capitalism thing is like the best of all possible worlds. And so what Graeber and Wengrow go to show is that that's not true at all. There are dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of societies that have been optimized for other things. So our current society is optimized for extraction, consumption, and centralization of wealth. I'm not saying it was intended to do that. That's just what's so right now. That's what's happening. That's what the data shows. There's all these other societies out there that were essentially vanquished because they weren't optimized for military strength. There's some that were optimized for sexual pleasure, some that are optimized for spiritual transcendence, some that were optimized for freedom, liberty, some that are optimized for play. And so what they do is they kind of stretch this canvas of like, this is the journey we've been on, and we've had a lot of great ideas, and we've had this other idea of like dominance and control that kind of destroyed all these other great ideas. And they go on to say it's not inevitable, it's just what happened, and we can reimagine something better. Now, why does this matter for understanding the United States? Well, if there ever was a time to reimagine, it's now, right? If we keep playing the same game, it's Civil War, fall of the Republic, Gilead. Like we're in a bad way, and it's getting worse. So I found this book to be very hopeful. Now, some of the criticism is it's very tedious, meaning like they give lots of examples to illustrate the same points. But I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed understanding the specifics of all the different types of possibility that are there. And it can be said that even though it's not part of our national purpose, that possibility, belief in the possible, is what it means to be an American. So this book helped me get back in touch with that, like that I could actually, have this like wild-eyed, like, what the hell is next? Side note, with Cornel West's announcement this week, and just a lot of folks popping their heads up and saying like, we should maybe think about doing this whole democracy thing differently. I was walking through Bernal Heights yesterday with my buddy Dave, and saw this picture. It said, the portal is opening. So I invite you to consider, so Bernal Heights in San Francisco, I invite you to consider that there's an opening. There is a chasm that is revealing itself to us, like a birth process. It's dilating. Something new is being birthed. So I invite you to pay attention to that. And I think a book like Dawn of Everything can do that. Now, specifically when it comes to the United States, and really a lot of Central Mesoamerica, the origins of democracy and many of the democratic institutions and ideas did not come from the French Enlightenment. That's what this book shows, is actually these are native things here. These were developed over millennia by First Nations folks here in the States and Mesoamerica. So when Franklin, Jefferson, Adams, Washington, when they got here and they started to think about what's possible, there was already conversation between the First Nations that we were enacting a genocide on, but they were already enlightening us with the Iroquois or Haudenosaunee Great Law of Peace. So constitutional democracy, parliamentary democracy, as we saw with the Tlaxcalans in Mesoamerica, public housing that we saw in many parts of Mexico, going back thousands of years. So this is, in a sense, the heritage. Democracy is the heritage of this soil in a way that it's not as much other places. There are, of course, democratic things that have happened other places in the world, going back to the Neolithic time frames. But this is where like the big ideas of what's called the French Enlightenment actually happened. So Dawn of Everything shows the paper trail from the Jesuit and Franciscan scholar / missionaries and what they learned about the extremely advanced, highly democratic foundations, history, legacy that was already here. So those are the ideas that we now have written in our Constitution, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, all that good stuff. They were here first, before us. So I think that's really important. The second book I want to recommend, following on The Dawn of Everything, is Indigenous Peoples' History by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. So she tracks how our what's known as the United States or Turtle Island, how it was populated. So it tracks like the first humans that were here. And she does a great job of showing how we borrowed and stole and eventually wiped out a lot of folks, betrayed them, but that the United States was not discovered, it was conquered. It was taken. So we need to get that we're here not by invitation. We are here because we had other ideas about what should happen here other than the people who were already living here. I could say a lot more about that book, but I think one of a good film, if you don't want to read this book, it's a mini series basically called Exterminate All the Brutes on HBO. Takes a lot of these ideas and makes them visual, so I recommend that movie as well. Okay, so moving on from Indigenous Peoples' history, I think at this point it would be good to look at the documentary history of the United States. So it's called A Documentary History of the United States, written by a father-son team, Richard Heffner and Stephen Heffner or something like that, Heffner. So this book is unique in its approach. So it looks at actually the documents. So Articles of Confederation, and it lays them out historically, and then through narrative and telling the context, like ties them all together, like why the Federalist Papers were the way they were. The debates going back and forth, strong federal government, weak federal government, states versus the nation. So it's kind of like a Howard Cosell play-by-play for how we got the documents, the structure, the whole shebang, basically. I don't have to show you because I lent it to my mom, and I hope it comes back in one piece. I'm sure it will. But yeah, that I think would that gives you the more kind of like, here are the facts. Here's why we fought for this law, why civil rights in this way. And I think the most recent edition goes up to Trump's first impeachment, and of course I think the second impeachment, and the insurrection. So it's a good way to kind of tie it all together, these ideas, and the march of progress and regress. So from here, I recommend A People's History of the United States, which is by Howard Zinn, and that looks at not the leaders and the wars and the policies and the legislation and the documentation, but like, what was it actually like for the first European Americans here? So it shows that most folks were pretty tired of having been exploited in Europe, pretty tired of having been exploited by the landowners here. That there was a lot of solidarity with Native folks, with Black folks, with the freemen, as well as with the enslaved. And it's not a history of slavery or the slave trade or the slave labor camps, but it is a history of those who were considered citizens at that time. So, yeah, I mean, in the way that like Studs Terkel working is about like regular people, like what was it actually like for people? I invite you to check out A People's History of the United States. You'll see that it was pretty cruddy. I mean, there's some good things like religious freedom, but worked really hard, didn't have much to show for it. So those are the first European Americans here. So from here, now that we've talked about the natives, the First Nations, the kind of poor whites, 1619 Project by Nikole Hannah-Jones and many other authors. This book, I'll pull it up here. 1619 Project, super controversial. It kind of rewrites American history in a sense, meaning centering so much of what is great here in the Black American experience. So does an excellent job of taking us from the trade of enslaved captives to slave labor camps to liberation. But more than anything, well, I don't know, more than anything, who am I to say? I'm not Black, but the effect it had on me is like, it kind of made me want to be Black. Because the story here is so freaking inspiring. Like those who appreciate democracy most are the ones who have had the least access to it. And so many Black leaders, Black voices, activists, they're almost like at least my experience, again, who am I to say, but it feels like they're the torchbearers, the vision keepers of what this nation is supposed to be. Life in the pursuit of happiness for all created equal, e pluribus unum. And so it fulfills two roles, 1619 Project. It brings to the foreground the Black American experience, but it also like is very inspiring in that it shows that Black folks have been like basically building this country while being exploited by it. And keeping the ideas and the ideals alive. So 1619 Project, put that one on your list. So the next one is one that I'm reading now, and I think it's important. It's called Spiritual Democracy by Stephen Herman. And he is actually here in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's a Jungian analyst. And the reason I think he belongs on the list, or this book belongs on the list, is because it can be said that the United States was reborn in the run-up to and the aftermath of the Civil War, meaning we started to take these powerful words seriously through abolition, and that there is more than just like this constitutional democracy that was borrowed heavily from First Nations folks that we decided to organize and distribute power and resources. But there's actually like a deep spiritual liberating thing happening here that has never happened before in all of human history. And I'm not saying we're the best democracy or the most highly functioning or anything like that. But the task set before us is to be the largest multiracial liberal democracy. And that in this book, they explore like kind of the spiritual weight, the meaning, the backing through an exploration of Jung in terms of liberation as like self-actualization, moving from ego to your higher self. Looking at Melville incorporating evil into what the divine is, what the cosmos is. That has been something that I don't know if any country really has addressed, and Melville gives us access to evil as something that is also divine and that must be transformed. I'll swing back to that here in a second. Looks at Whitman as like the bard, the poetic shaman that is evoking this deeper like evolutionary spiritual call to become e pluribus unum, all created equal, to become democracy ourselves. So what I'm getting from this is that he took on the United States in his own flesh, in his own soul. And there's so much more there. But Emily Dickinson's words also very shamanic, very a voice of resistance, a voice of sensuality, eroticism. All these poets, wordsmiths, had a deeply sensual, connected, visceral, embodied way. Now, another key reason why I think spiritual democracy deserves your attention is that in Whitman's view, there are 3 levels of our democracy. One is the linguistic, like the laws, the Constitution, the framework for cooperation. So it's like this theoretical mental structure. And then there's the material. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all created equal, as expressions of e pluribus unum. And then the spiritual, where we actually get to be one. And so this moment that we're in of chaos, hopelessness, resignation, we need to get what this whole thing is about. So it is about Buy the World a Coke. It is about the Benetton ad. It is about loving your brother, your sister as much as yourself. And to get there from here, because right now we have the intellectual framework and we've got a really cruddy material expression of it. To get there, we have to transform ourselves and all of our institutions so that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and all created equal can actually happen. And we realize the unity in our diversity, we realize the deep love that binds us all. So he adds this kind of this civic religion, this thing that is like bigger than us, bigger than college funds and living a good life. It's like, no, we're actually doing this super powerful spiritual thing here in the United States. And in Whitman's view, very much a mystic, universal globalist, like we're doing this not just for ourselves, but to show the way for humanity to come together across difference. I'm tingling. I'm like, hell yeah, that's what we got to do. So, as I mentioned, Melville gave us a view into evil and incorporating evil and understanding it. But my friend Reggie Mara, just last year, gave us this book, Healing America's Narratives, the Feminine, Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow. So we have to transform all the stuff that's in the way of us realizing that this great love for each other. And what Reggie does is outline our national shadow. He gives us access to hear all the like really cruddy ways that we show up that are, that's not who we are. It's not our purpose. So like greed, ignorance, arrogance. I mean, there's like 9 of them he articulates. And he, doesn't just name them. He like shows like, this is actually what's happening here, what's happening there. This is what's in the way of us working together to create this thing we're up to, this game. And we can't look away. We can't just pretend that evil doesn't happen, because it's freaking happening. It's on front page every day. And so my invitation to you, again, I'm just going to end and just reprise, start with Dawn of Everything. It'll unlock the field of possibility for what we can truly be here in the United States and as a species. Then Indigenous people's history, like tracking the first Americans who came here, down through Central America and then back up. Looking at people's history of the United States. Documentary history of the United States. Looking at these core documents, these core ideas, and how they were hard won and fought over. And really just like the entire history of the United States as told through our documents. Then people's history, what it was like for the average American. Then the 1619 Project, what it was like for African Americans, as well as this huge debt of gratitude that we have to them for showing us who we really are, for helping us see our own evil, our original sin. And then from there, spiritual democracy, the big ideas that this nation is about, the deep love, the cosmic love, the spiritual enlightenment embodied and souled and fleshed in Walt Whitman, but what's also possible for every American here. And then lastly, Reggie Mara's Healing America's Narratives. This, showing us the front line. These are the dynamics we have to spiritually, psychologically, economically, and politically transform in order to realize this great spiritual purpose. So, I also mentioned a couple of the worthy mentions. Soul of Nations by Wolfgang Alrosa. He's a German man who wrote a book about what is the soul of a nation and gives special treatment to the United States. If you really want to get a little mystical, encourage that. And also my friend Eric Liu's book, Become America. So I'm currently a fellow with Eric's organization, Citizen University. And after the 2016 election, he began holding civic faith gatherings and delivering sermons, and also, small group discussions and music, and looking at civic scripture. So like, our documents, Dr. King's speeches, these sorts of things. And so he does a very good job of speaking to like the power of what this idea is, as Whitman said, become America yourself. So I highly recommend that one too. All right, Godspeed. Leave me comments, questions, and yeah, I want to know how these books land for you. And in the fall, hopefully we can have another discussion about what's next. Take care.